Hi, I'm back on the Stephen King train because today I'm going to be looking at Firestarter. Now, Firestarter was released in 1980 and it is definitely one of his lesser talked about books and I think one of his absolute most underrated. So, I read this one about 3 or 4 weeks ago and I really enjoyed it and I thought, yeah, I'm going to say it's in my top 10 favourite Stephen King books now. But before we actually delve into the book itself, let's just have a look at the length. My copy of Firestarter is 560 pages. 566 pages. So it's decently long. I'd say it's a little bit over average for a Stephen King book. It's most of them probably between 500 to 550. And I especially love meaty books, and I really love it when meaty books move fast, and this one moves quickly. It's not the kind of book where you have to wait a couple of hundred pages to get into the action like The Shining or Salem's Lot. This one throws you straight in, straight away. It does get a little bit slow during the middle of the book, but that's completely made up for by the writing of one character who just makes me want to puke. The plot of this book is revolved around a girl, I can't remember, she's like 6 or 7, and her name is Charlie McGee, and she has the power of pyrokinesis, which means the ability to start fires with her mind, hence Firestarter. And it also is about her dad, Andy McGee. Andy has a sort of telekinetic mind control power, which was a side effect from a drug test that he partook in when he was a lot younger, probably early 20s. And yeah, and eventually Charlie, his kid, that drug test affected Charlie and she got pyrokinesis from it. But the problem with this is that there is a very corrupt and cruel government chasing down Charlie and Andy, specifically Charlie, trying to harness her pyrokinesis powers and use it for testing and studying military weapons. So yeah, even military, using a little girl as a military weapon, it's pretty f***ed up. The book has a great sense of paranoia in it, and another thing is the relationship between Andy and Charlie. It is really well written. I really love their father-daughter relationship. It can only be described as one word, as beautiful. And then the villain, the main villain of the story, his name's John Rainbird. He's a f***ing piece of shit. He is disgusting. A really good point raised in this guy's Firestarter review is that a lot of Stephen King's most famous villains are supernatural entities and have an evil force driving them, such as Pennywise/It and Randall Flagg. Villains like Annie Wilkes, or in this case John Rainbird, are villains because they want to be villains. They are purely evil people, and it is disgustingly terrifying. They're just humans with demented and sick, twisted mindsets, and in John Rainbird's case, I actually get goosebumps just thinking about him. He is revolting. I hate him so much, and I commend Stephen King so much for being able to write such a hateable character. And a criticism about Stephen King's books, which is made a lot, is to do with his endings. But I completely disagree with that, and this is another book that I just point people in the direction to when they're thinking, oh, what's a Stephen King book with an actual good ending? He has no many good ones. This one has a really good ending. A really exciting, brilliant climax. I love the ending of this book. It's also worth mentioning that because this was so early on in King's career, it's strange that you don't see it get mentioned as readily as you do with books like Carrie or The Stand or The Shining. And it's annoying because I think this book's really underrated, but I can kind of understand. But I can't really explain it, so yeah, just be aware. I'm going to have a little bit of a long ramble on because I couldn't really put the words in how I feel about why this book doesn't get as much attention in my own mouth. Sorry. I just believe that this book doesn't leave as much of an imprint as books like Carrie and The Stand do. And don't get me wrong, I actually prefer Firestarter over Carrie, but it just didn't quite hit home as quite as much as Carrie did. For example, Carrie is really quite short and condensed, but has a phenomenal message to take home with it, and a real punch in the gut kind of feeling. Salem's Lot is terrifying because it hits home to all those people that do live in small towns, and it just makes it actually seem real and believable, and you feel like you're actually there. And even for people who don't, people that like, you know, live in the city or out in the middle of nowhere, they can... It's a good one to really resonate with and imagine yourself in. And that's why it's loved by so many people. And The Shining, it's just a really good take on a haunted house story. The Stand is a massive post-apocalyptic novel that, you know, people remember it for its sheer length alone. The Dead Zone is a romantic drama that leave many of people bawling their eyes out. And Cujo is about a rabid dog. Just about a dog. You know, Firestarter is about a girl who starts fires with her mind and is on the run from a government. Don't get me wrong, it sounds really, really good, and it is. It just doesn't leave as much of a footprint as The Dead Zone and Carrie do. You know what I mean? All the books that I've previously mentioned have really gory, graphic, horrible, memorable scenes. And while Firestarter has that for sure, it wasn't quite as memorable for me as with things that happened in The Dead Zone or Carrie. And you know what? It pains me to say this because this book is fantastic. It's a really, really good book. The characters are great. The villain is incredible. The storyline is fantastic. The relationship between Andy and Charlie is perfect. And it's so interesting and exciting pretty much the whole way through. I just don't understand what it is with this book that doesn't quite resonate as much as the others. And I can tell that I'm not the only person that thinks that. Because by thinking about the plot, it sounds like basically a perfect Stephen King book. Like, you couldn't ask for anything better. But then you could. I've heard some people describe this book as a completely average, run-of-the-mill Stephen King book. That I don't agree with. I think it is a lot more than that. But I can also see where they're coming from. And for the last time, I'll mention that there is hardly anything wrong with this book. It just doesn't pack as much of a punch as his other ones. This book gets an 85% from me. It does lose a few points for those reasons that I've just rambled on forever and can't really explain, but it gains so many more just for everything else about it. There are 4 great things about this book that I think pretty much every Stephen King book needs to have. A really good and terrifying premise. B, great protagonists. C, fantastic villains. And D, action and just exciting. It just needs to be... It doesn't even need to be action. It just needs to be exciting and gripping. And it is. At the end of the day, this book is 100% worth the read, but it just kind of lacks something. I don't know what it is. And I can't pinpoint that something, and that's really, really annoying, because I love this book. I like it a lot. I feel like I've said that 50 times today. Oh yeah, and I'm really, really excited for the new movie to come out. That's all for me today, and I'm not exactly sure what I'll do next, but that's my opinion on Firestarter. I'll figure something out.